Okay, Earthquake Versatiller assembly video. And the first part here, I just took it out of the box, and now you got to turn the wheels around. They ship it with the wheels facing where the tines should be. So what you have to do is take the wheel bar off, flip it around, and line it up to the 4 holes that it's supposed to be in. Which originally I just flipped it around, put it in some holes. I ended up being the wrong ones. I had to go up to the next set. And it comes with these hand screws that you put in. The reason for that is you can actually take those out and tilt it back about 5 to 10 degrees. Put them back in, and that way your handlebars will actually be a little bit lower. So someone who's not 5'10" or 6 foot tall, so you're 5 foot tall, then they'll be set back lower for you to use. Now if you are taller, you probably want to put it up in a straight up position, which the straight up position isn't bad, and if you're moving it around a lot, it makes it easier to tilt it back and just roll it around on the wheels. It allows you to get the tines off the ground without having to put a lot of effort into it to make, so you got 4 or 5 inches of clearance when you're moving over the grass. So yeah, the bad part about the directions, while they tell you, okay, use M4 so many millimeters long, they don't say which bolt's which. It comes basically with 4 sets. There's 2 wider ones, there's 4 medium-sized ones of one length, and then a little bit longer, and then there are 2 bolts that are for this with nuts and washers. And you got to sit there and figure out which set of 2 bolts, because they're both the same thread and same size basically. Well, the heads are different on them. That's the only difference. If you look at the parts manual, it'll help you figure it out, save you some time. Now the tines, when they ship them, they come put together like pieces. So you got, instead of having the left side sent in as, okay, this is the configuration for the wider setting, these 2 go on the left, these 2 go on the right, there's no part identification. The only identification on the part is an arrow showing direction, which is convenient. Directions. When you put the tines together, there will be the 2 middle ones that have a larger hub center, and they're designed to slide onto the spacer piece. So you line those up, put the bolt in, and that's going to be the 2 larger bolts that come in the kit. You put those bolts in, tighten them down. Now on the outside, the way they make this is so it can be changed to different sizes. You have a 22-inch tilling depth. You have a, I believe, 16 and 11 inch. Well, the 11 inch is going to be just the 2 center tines by themselves. The outer 2 tines can be swapped from left to right, so that way you can maintain the direction. And that gives you the 16-inch width. If you put them on the outside measurement, where the longer part of the shaft is in between the tines, that'll be your 22-inch setting. Now the directions aren't real specific as far as which goes where, and you got to sit there and kind of figure it out. Yeah, I was getting frustrated at this point, because I'd already wasted like 10-15 minutes saying, okay, if this goes like this goes like this, how does this go on here, and where's the spacer go, and which way is it supposed to go? Is it supposed to slide into this part? Yeah, the directions weren't really specific. You just got to sit there and figure it out from the picture. No, but the larger ones, the larger bore hub slides onto that collar. That collar goes on, and then there's a hole. You put a bolt through it, tighten it down, and just remember your direction arrows will give you which one's left and which one's right side. And then the other 2, as long as your direction arrows are facing forward, it's either going to mount short side on one side to have a smaller dig, or it's going to be on the longer shaft on the opposite side to give you a wider dig. And the directions don't really cover that so much. They briefly mention it on moving the tines, but by the time you figure out, okay, well, this bolt hole goes here, this goes here, and then how's this slide together? The good thing is this thing doesn't take too many different sockets. I think it's a 15, 13, 12 maybe, and then 8mm for the back cover. Which the back cover I was a lot at the time on because it was semi-deformed. But yeah, I sped up the video just because I spent the better part of an afternoon putting this thing together, which I didn't mind. I had the time. But it's just frustrating when the directions aren't very specific. That's something the company could do better. But the parts manual has a good breakdown. It tells you which parts are what. It gives you part numbers. So you can reorder some parts probably. The engine comes fully assembled. The only thing you have to do with that is put gas in it and put oil in it. That's the only thing out of the box. Make sure you put oil in it because it's shipped with no oil, empty, bone dry. Okay. So I got the wheels on, got the ties together, and if you look here, you see the little cotter pins on the outside pieces. The bolts go in the center shaft, which is a larger hub, and then the smaller hubs on the outside, and use that small cotter pin. There's one for each side. These are the outside covers. If you're using the wider attachment, 22-inch, it keeps the dirt from flinging everywhere. When you change it into a lower setting, the tines will be inside of the red cover. But I think the covers are removable just so if you've got narrow rows, that way you're not brushing up against your plants and possibly messing up with the black plastic guards. But if you've got 2 foot in between your rows, which a lot of the gardening seeds suggest, you shouldn't be close to your plants. Cover. Now the cover came a little warped. That could have been from just shipping, been sitting, just, you know, it got hot and it's got, the way it's sitting in the box was a little crunched up, so it didn't line up real well. So what I ended up having to do is actually take each screw and line them up and get them started like 1 or 2 threads on each, and then tighten like 1 turn each and go all the way around until it was snug enough where I could actually tighten it down. The first time I put it in, I just put the top 2 in, like, okay, this lines up, this is nice. And I went to the bottom, and there's about a ½ inch difference, and the screws didn't even touch. So I had to back the screws off from the top to get the bottom screws to start, and then I had to just go around and start them until it started pulling an even tension all the way around them. Now the belt tensioner, it does give a brief mention in the directions about the belt tensioner, but until you actually have it fully assembled, it's not really possible to check to see if your tension's right. But this has a good like 1.5 to 2 inches of pull before this belt actually engages into the where it's going to make the tines move. So I just checked it as best I could by pulling it just to see where it engaged. That way I could try to figure out which hole on the handlebar I could line this other end of the cable up so it pulls. And I believe I put it on the middle setting and it works just fine. But that it does give you a little bit of adjustment, so if the cable stretches you can put it in the next hole back. That gives you another ½ inch. Then after that you would have to adjust it on the tensioner. But by then the cable will probably be so stretched you probably have to buy a new cable, if they still make them. So I don't know. The cable tensioners on lawnmowers and stuff for like blade brakes usually last 10-12 years. I doubt if you're going to need to change it because most people don't use tillers that often. Yeah, I just added a little note here. I already covered that. Start each screw. Now if your cover comes in and it's not all messed up, the little wrinkles in it where it kind of deformed, and then, you know, it fits perfectly and the screws start, man, I wasted over ½ an hour trying to figure all this out and taking time and little itty bitty screws. And then the screws go into these speed tabs, which speed tabs are notorious for breaking off, and it's only on a plastic cover. After 5-6 years, this plastic cover is probably going to have tabs that break. At that point, I'm just going to put Velcro on it and make it easy. Velcro on both sides, split it, and put a nice big piece of Velcro on the outside. That way if I ever have to get into the belt, I just pull the Velcro, pull the cover off, and done. Probably not suggested, but yeah. And the handlebars, a note, I rated my bolts from the inside out, so that way if the screws do back off, they are nylon washer screws. They shouldn't back off, but if they do, I personally didn't want the little nuts and washers flying around the belt, possibly messing something up. And the bolt, you know, if you see the nut fall off, you can at least do something about that without the bolt actually falling in. I mean, it could, but you've got a little bit of time to stop, you know, turn everything off and do something about it before you actually have something to get pulled off. But the directions don't really say which way to put the bolts. The top bolts for the handle, it has the hand nut. That's so you can tilt the handle back like 5 degrees or whatever, or raise it up so it's straight up and down. So that way it gives you another 6 inches of height on the handlebars as you're using it. That's just set it to your own personal preference. They do give you an option. It's a nice little option, but most people will set it and forget it. Never worry about it, I'm sure. So at this point, just about got it all back together except for the handlebars. And the handlebars weren't too bad. Like I said, there's a left and a right hand side. Oh, nice note. The gas cap chain came unattached. There's no clip, there's no nothing to attach it to. I can understand having it there just to, you know, you pull the cap off, set it off the side, if it falls down, it's still attached, you don't lose it. It's not attached to anything. You think from the factory, you know, the gas cap is going to go with that gas tank. You know, they could have put a ring on it or something from the factory. That way, didn't have that obnoxious chain hanging off of it. So I sped the video back up. Right handlebar. Yeah, another one. Okay. Which of the 4 bolts are left? You put in. You put the thinner ones. You put the bigger ones. I went with the bigger ones on this. The smaller ones I used in the plate on the top because it's the last thing I had to put together. And some washers. Now, when you put the handlebars on, I ran into a problem with the top piece where it was slightly bent. You'll see it here later in the video. But yeah, I snugged them down real good. And honestly, just start it, snug it down where it still has some wobble in it, so you can put this other piece on here that holds the tine engagement cable. Yeah, I ran into a problem with this. You'll see it here in another minute or so. Took a little bit of gentle persuasion. I think I said gentle persuasion at least 50 times in the process of putting this thing together. Now, to the credit of the store, they did offer, I forget, was it $50 or $99 to have somebody come out and put it together for me? And I'm like, you know what? I've put hundreds of lawnmowers together. It shouldn't be much more difficult than putting a lawnmower together. I'll be fine. Plus, I had time to kill. So saving the money was actually worth it for me. But you could go to the store and buy it probably already assembled and not have to pay the assembly fee. Because they usually put like 10 or 12 of these together first time in the spring, and then if they sell them all, great. If not, there's usually 1 or 2 in the fall. The bad part is they've sat out all season in the rain and whatever, so you probably have to drain the gas tank and make sure there's no water in it when you put it together. My puppy's barking at something outside. Yeah, this left hand side had a little bend in where the part that mounts to the handlebar would be, so it needed to be corrected a little bit. So the gentle use of persuasion. I get most of the bolts in, but that last one just would not line up, and it wouldn't fit on there clean. So it's basically popping it back in to make it fit right. Then once I get it all up and it's lined up, I'm like, wow, this is pretty close. I went to put the bolt in, it was just off just that little bit of a hair where I couldn't get the bolt in. So I snugged all the bolts down and decided, okay, maybe I can thread it in. It didn't thread it. So I tried to pop it in. That didn't work either. So I finally came to the conclusion, I need to expand the hole, make a new hole. And after that, it lined right up. I didn't have a problem. But you see me drilling it out here very briefly because I sped this whole part of the video up. But yeah, the basic assembly of this whole thing is you got the side covers, the black ones left and right there. You got the tines, and you got the wheels to flip around. And then you got the handlebars put on. It's really not that complicated. It's just the directions don't really give you a lot of specifics, and the part numbers aren't really marked well. Which a lot of it's self-explanatory, but just try to figure out the tines. That was annoying. You're darn close now. So yeah, I went to go get the drill at this point. Yeah, here it is. You would think it was just going to work, but the holes don't line up. Yep. Yeah, it's a disappointing part of the project. You're like, oh, I'm almost done. We're so close. Here again, gentle use of persuasion. A little more aggressive. A little more. Yeah, it's not going anywhere because the plate was just enough. So I had to pop it back into place. And here shortly, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drill this out. This one hole isn't going to rust out the whole handle and make it worthless because I get my 5-10 years out of it. And hopefully at some point I'll have a bigger garden. I'll need a little bit bigger machine. I'll just go buy a used one instead of spending $1,000, whatever they want to charge for it then. Because a used machine will work me just fine. Because you think about it, most people use a tiller maybe an hour a year, maybe. Unless you got a really big garden plot. And then, okay, you might use it for 4 or 5 hours a year. That's a lot of tilling. That's like an acre. And just a spoiler alert, these do not break hard ground at all. It barely scratches the grass off. And the walk behind tillers have the same issues. They do work a little bit better because you can set it down and low, put the tines on high, and just let it sit there and dig and dig and dig. But you still have the same issue. You need to go out there with a shovel or something, turn that dirt over. Then once you just disturb the soil, these things all work fine. They'll beat and pulverize the ground up just fine, and you can make nice pretty rows and get what you need to do done. Turn in your leaves, grass clippings, whatever it is you're putting in your garden. You know, till it up, get rid of some weeds. They all work once the ground's been disturbed, but until then, cool. Yeah, I got that pretty red clay, and it's just hard as a rock when it's dry. This thing ain't, I don't know any tiller that's going to dig it up. But yeah, if you're going to use this, it works great on ground that's already been broken up, but you really need to not sell yourself short thinking, oh yeah, I'll buy a tiller and I'll just go out here and mark off my grass I want to dig up and just go to town. No. You're going to need a shovel and do some work if you want this to work effectively. And for just tilling up pre-disturbed soil, this thing works great for that. No complaints, and it's fairly manageable. Now, it's not that nice one-handed walk-behind operation that you'd so like to have. You need to keep two hands on it, and it will jump around on you. And I find when you're tilling, if you pull it backwards, it leaves a much better path of finely ground up soil than having that depth gauge, having that drag mark down. It looks like you're putting rows in as you're tilling. Which that might work to your advantage too if you're setting up your garden. You're just going to go with that kind of spacing. But whenever you're tilling up a garden, you want to go over it a couple times anyway, different directions, whatever. You want to have it nice and mixed in really good, especially if you're putting compost on top and adding it to your soil. Time to add the oil. Part number 710. Now, if you've never heard the joke, lady goes into the parts store, says, I need part 710. The clerk at the counter is like, part 710? So he goes, looks it up, can't find part 710. It's like, where's this part go? She goes, under the engine. He's like, where on the engine? It's like, under the hood. It's like, well, can you show me? They walk out of the car, and she points right at the fill cap and goes, see, part 710. Oil spelled back upside down. Yeah, so if you haven't heard that joke, yeah, that's what that was. Now, when you fill the oil on these, it's old school. They want you to line up. You know, the words came out perfect in all the other things I did in this video, and then I just watching it out for the first time. Yeah, it says watch part 3. That way you can see the engine start on the first pull. Yeah, when you fill the oil up, they want you to fill it up to the bottom of the threads, which is an old school way of saying, okay, you've got oil in your crankcase. It's been a common practice for, what, 60, 70 years? Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Watch part 3 where you can see the amazing first pull.